Hey, welcome back. Part 3 of probably the most important video I will ever make. So thank you for watching this, I really appreciate it. It's really important, just watching this is helping. Children, much as we might like to believe otherwise, are sexual beings. Okay, I'm going to qualify that statement, okay, so please don't misread that. What I mean by that is that they have the ability to experience sexual sensations and the ability to enjoy sexual sensations, and they have an innate sexual curiosity. Okay. However, the largest sex organ, which is the brain, has not developed, and socially and emotionally and developmentally, children are not prepared in any way, shape or form for making sense of sexual content. Okay, there's certain things they can understand things on a very basic level, and there's different ideas and different philosophies about what you should say to children when they ask you sexual questions. But what we found is that when children are exposed to sexual content at an early age, it's incredibly damaging. It damages them in all kinds of ways. They can't really process it. Okay. And a lot of people that go on to suffer with things like sex addiction, and there is such a thing as sex addiction. It's a controversial subject at the moment, and there are people that would argue against it, and it's not in the current psychiatric diagnostic manuals, but there is such a thing as sex addiction, and we can talk more about that. One of the often common etiological causative factors of sex addiction is an early exposure to sexual content, and this can be something like, in the old days, this would be something like finding a pornographic magazine, or perhaps seeing an older brother or sister making love, and that kind of thing. And these things, often, did some damage. But these days, obviously, it's far worse. As we talked about in the previous part, the content that's in pornography is far more graphic. It's videos rather than just pictures. The old school porn that I, used to kind of come across occasionally when I was young was, it wasn't even penetrative. It was just, it was what they used to call girly magazines. So it was kind of pictures of quite kind of artistically kind of created pictures of naked or semi-naked women. But even that, if a child is exposed to that, can do damage because they can't process it. They feel guilt and shame and confusion. Okay. Now, what is the most common way that children make sense of the world? Easy, isn't it? Play. Yeah. So, if you are a fashion designer, your children, might start kind of playing at, designing fashion. They might do drawings or cut things out or play with fabric. That's what children do. If something happens to a child, they play it out. If they see something in a film, they play it out. They play out their parents' occupation. They play out things that they see. They play out things that they think about. They act it out all through play. So when a child has been exposed to sexual content, they act it out through play, and this is where a whole different level of harm takes place, because they, will engage their peers. And sometimes that will be their same age peers. Sometimes it will be younger and more vulnerable peers. Now, an important distinction needs to be made here because, probably most children will engage in some kind of sex play. Okay, and that is normal and healthy. The I'll show you mine if you show me yours games, that are kind of consensual. They're not the end of the world, obviously, parents need to kind of keep a bit of an eye on that it's not something more sinister, but, children do play sex games without having been exposed to sexual material out of curiosity. They're curious about each other's bits, okay? But this is a whole different kind of level, as things are played out on a different level. So the kind of things that happen is children will try and, and this, I'm not, this isn't kind of stuff I'm making up. This is stuff that I've worked with on a weekly basis. Children will, they will try and penetrate their peers, whether they be male or female. They will kiss and suck genitals, get other children to kiss and suck their genitals. A common another form of abusive and harmful behaviour is one child will show another child pornography, which is harmful enough. Just that is harmful enough. So this is what's happening on a daily basis, and the children are acting it out. Okay, and it's getting the children into trouble. So it kind of gets brought to the attention of the other parents, or it gets brought to the attention of the school, and in many cases it gets brought to the attention of the police. Now, if you think how much shame there is around sexuality anyway, for everyone, and for children particularly, because they're confused and they're kind of shameful. I don't mean they feel shameful, I'm not saying they are shameful, that's a very big difference. So if a child, through no fault of their own, is exposed to sexual material, and these days more and more and more it's pornography, because it's so easy to access, and they act that out, then immediately they are stigmatised, they are shamed, they feel guilty. I've also worked with situations where a child has acted out this kind of sexual stuff with peers, and the whole family have been persecuted. The parents of the other child have actually been violent towards the whole family, so the child is bearing the guilt of the violence that's happening to the parents because it's something they did. And children children soak up guilt like a sponge soaks up water. So you can see where this is kind of going. The more exposure there is, and the more potential for exposure to this kind of thing, the more children will act out, they'll play, and they'll get confused, they'll get sexualised too early, and then the behaviours will get reinforced because they'll get excited by that, and it can form a pattern, and they get stigmatised when it gets attention drawn to it, or they get punished by the parents and stuff like that. So it's not the fault of the children. The children are innocents in this, even if the behaviour is sexual. They are innocent. Okay, this is the fault of us adults allowing this sort of stuff to be so easily available. It's not on the top shelves anymore. Well, it is on the top shelves in the shops, but it's not on. There's no top shelf in the internet. We think there are, but older kids pass it on to younger kids, pass it on to younger kids. This stuff, it's Pandora's box. It's out of the bag. It's not going to be put back unless somebody does something seriously radical about it. Okay, so that's a big part of what I deal with in my job. It doesn't get talked about very much, but it's happening more and more and more and more. Okay, so the other way, of course, in which children become sexualised at a premature age is through sexual abuse. Okay, which is from adults, as well as from other children. Sorry, noise in the background. And that's a kind of another kind of big issue, and quite possible that the adult abusers are people who've been exposed to sexual material at an earlier stage as well. But there are loads more factors to that, so I'm not going to kind of get too much into that. That's a whole different subject, really. So just to kind of sum up, sexual exposure, children being exposed to sexual content can be through seeing parents having sex, or older brother or sister having sex. It can be through sexual abuse, and it can be through pornography. Children are naturally sexually curious, and they engage in a certain degree of sex play anyway, which generally speaking isn't harmful, and shouldn't be made too big a deal of. There's I'll see if I can put a link to this. There's a piece of work actually with somebody that's put together 3 different stages, 3 different levels, if you like, of child sexualization, which is starts with kind of healthy, and then starts with highly sexualized, and then goes on to abusive, which is really interesting, really useful. So if you're watching this and your child has played some sex games, first of all, don't panic. Don't overreact. Find out what's gone on. It's probably normal childhood curiosity. Okay, what we're talking about here with the exposure to the pornography is something much more sinister and much more extreme. So we'll finish this video here, and we'll get a little bit more into the effects of the content of pornography, and we'll start to talk about also how this affects adults. So I'll see you again very, very shortly. Rangi Mario.